Gesagt der Heilige Mishnah. Ezoi Yeshua Shav. What is a Shavuot Shav? Again, this Mishnah will be very familiar. Nishpa Lashana says Hayidul Adam. One example of a Shavuot Shav, somebody who swore Lashana says Hayidul Adam to change the obvious. For instance, Amr Alha Amr Shal Evan Shu Shal Zav, Yala Ish Shu Isha. Yes, that is obvious. Yes, it is a very Dulakoil. Yala Isha Sheyish. What about Nishba al Davar Ef Shaloi? You swore about something that's impossible. Im loyre isi gamal sheparech ba'aver. Right? Camels don't fly, so that's also shvu shav because it's swearing about a crazy thing that's impossible to happen. Now the Gemara is going to tell us a little bit. Is the shvu should have been im nishma shara'ah gamal parech ba'aver. Right? That would be a normal way to structure this. What's the lashon hamishna of im loyre isi gamal sheparech ba'aver? Okay. Or v'mloy isi nachash kekuris beisabad, and the pashtus not the maskana, but the havamina of the Gemara is, if I didn't see a nachash that's so thick, it's like a beam of a beisabad, which is the beam that would be the weight to squeeze down on the grapes or the oil or the olives that would squeeze out the oil. So again, these are all making shavuos that you saw something that's simply not factual, simply impossible to occur. That also is called a shvuah shav. Okay, Zok to Heilige Mishnah Vayter. Another example. Amar la Edom. He told Edom, Boyu the Heidi Uni. Come say Edus on my behalf. I believe you have testimony that I need. Shvuah shaloi neidach. They said, we are making a shvuah that we will not say Edus for you. Let's have a look at the Rashi might have commented on this. No, he didn't. Yeah, here's Rashi. Shavuos nidach bitul mitzvah. That's neder levatlas a mitzvah, and that also is Rashi hani davar sheyefsher. So if you swear to the bevatla mitzvah, that shvuah will not be chal, and therefore it's also a shvuah shav. Shvuah, how about nishma levatla as a mitzvah? Or you swore to be mevatel any mitzvah, or for instance, shaloi lasoi sukkah. You swore you will not make a sukkah. V'shaloi lita lulav, you won't shake the lulav. V'shaloi laniach tefillin, and not to wear tefillin. Zui shvuah shav. These are all examples of shvuah shav. It's any shvuah that is useless. It won't accomplish anything. So without nishba levatlas a mitzvah is not chal. In other words, it's not going to oblige you to be mevatlas a mitzvah because you cannot swear to be mevatlas a mitzvah. So now it's as if you made a wasted shvuah, so it falls into the category of shvuah shav. Shechayavin al zadoina makos val shulgasa potter. Right, a shvuah bitoy you're chayav al zadoina makos and shulgasa you're chayav a carbon oil v'yored. But a shvuah shav you're potter on shoyu. What about shvuah sha'oichel kikarzu? He made a shvuah that I will eat this kikar, and then he made a shvuah shaloy oichlana. So the second shvuah is another levatel, is a shvuah levatel mitzvah, because the first shvuah, which obliged him to eat the kikar, now makes eating the kikar into a mitzvah. So when he swore right afterwards, shvuah shaloy oichlana, harishayin is shvuah bitoy. The first is a shvuah bitoy, vashniya shvuah shav, and the second one is a shvuah shav. So if someone swore both ways, so then achla, he would have to eat it. He would eat the kikar. The Mishnah is like, if he ate the kikar, so over al shvuah shav, he'll be over on the shvuah shav, but not on the shvuah bitoy. So you're going to ask me, we just said that the second shvuah is not chal, and that's why it's a shvuah shav. So even my achla would be over al shvuah shav. So the Mefarshim tells us exactly what the Mishnah means. Achla over al shvuah shav, not because of the achila. You're over the shvuah shav as soon as you made the shvuah shav. It doesn't matter if you ate it or not. Lo yachla, if you didn't eat it, then over al shvuah bitoy, because the shvuah bitoy said that obliged you to eat it. Okay. Zog to Gemara weiter. It's funny because the Gemara has different examples of fantasy scenarios. The Tana has different scenarios of fantasy scenarios. So Tosfos asks, by Imloira Isi Gamal Parech, Tamerfik Tosfos. The Hacha for the fantasy scenario the Tana picks, Katani Gamal Parech. V'loi Katani Ka'olim Mitzrayim. Sometimes some fantasy scenario the Talmud will say is, oh yeah, I saw such a big crowd there, they were Ka'olim Mitzrayim, which is also a guzma, it's also a fantasy. Like a Tani Gamal Parech. I don't know why sometimes the Tana picks this fantasy and sometimes the Tana picks a different fantasy. That could be. That could be. Zok to Gemara. Amar Ula. V'hu shenikar legimel b'nei adam. That we said that if you swear Amud shel Evan Shushal Zov or vice versa, when is it a Shavuos Shav? That's only if it's known to three people, so it's known to the public. Only then it would be considered a Shavuos Shav. Otherwise, it would be considered a Shavuos Sheker. Halacha l'maisa, does it make a difference between a Shavuos Shav and a Shavuos Sheker? Not really, because neither of them do you bring a carbon out of Yerit for. Nishba al davar. Oh, I think I just misspoke. It could be for a Shavuos Sheker, you'd also be chayiv another yard. That's the case of the Sha'avar. It would depend on if you hold a Shavuos on a Sha'avar is a good Shavuos. Is it considered a Shavuos B'tay? Nishba al davar she'av shalai. What if he swore about something that's impossible to have occurred? For instance, Imloira isi gamal parech baba. Zok to Gemara, Shavuos shara isi loy kamar. The lashon, the simplest way for the Mishnah to express his halach is if someone swears that I saw gamal parech baba, that's a Shavuos shav. But that's not what the words of the Mishnah say. The words of the Mishnah say Imloira isi. What's pshat? My Imloira isi. Abai Amar, not a problem. Just amended. Tani Shavuos shara isi. Rav Amar, Rav said it's where he made a more complex Shavuos. Where he said, "Ba'omer ye asru kol peiros sheba'olam alai." Making a Shavuos to aser all of the pairs of the world to me. Im loira ishi gamal parech ba'avir. Now this changes the whole story around, because the loira ishi gamal parech ba'avir is just a trigger. The Shavuos shav is someone who said ye asru kol peiros sheba'olam alai. It's impossible for someone to go forever without ever eating peiros, and that's the Shavuos shav. So it literally changes the whole picture around. Now, this gets into a big machlokes for Shloim that we touched on, which Tosfos touches on over here, is can you make a neder b'lashon shvuah? Yeyasu kol peres olam shmalai. That sounds like koinim, right? Yeyasu kol peres olam shmalai b'shvuah is what he said. If I didn't see ga'amal parech b'aver. So the question is, if you structure it like a neder but call it a shvuah, is it a neder or is it a shvuah? That's a machlokes for Shloim. Amarle Ravina l'Ravashi. Ravina asked Ravashi the question, the following question: Vidilma, maybe this guy has his own names for things, and maybe it's not a Shavuos shav at all, because Vidilma Haigava Tzipoyer Rabachazi, he saw a big bird flying, the Asaklei Shema Gamla, and he called it a Gamal. He named it that. So in his Shavuah that he's making, he's telling the truth. Right? I'm sure it's happened where you saw a huge dog, right? And you called it, that's not a dog, that's a horse, right? I remember, I'm very afraid of animals. And I remember I was once in a basement of someone's house working on their furnace. And I don't know for the life of me why the kitty litter has to always be in the basement, in the furnace room. Maybe put it in the living room. What do they start up with me for? So I got in between this tiger and the kitty litter. So this big fat tiger comes up on me, about to attack because I'm getting in his way. He's growling. And I panic, say, help, help. And this 4-year-old girl comes running and scoops up this huge tiger and says, "Oh, kitty, come here, kitty." I said, "How dare you call that kitty? That thing is a tiger," right? So I could call it a tiger. It's very when you're afraid, and a little 3-year-old girl bails you out and calls it kitty. He said, "What are you kidding? It's 50 pounds." And maybe when he made his shvua that he saw Gomel Parech Ba'aver, Adaita Yidei Shtaba. Maybe it's based on his identification that he's swearing, and that would not be a shvua shav at all. Zok to Gemara, the chitema basor humei aslinan, v'loy aslinan basor daite. And if you say it doesn't matter what he's thinking of how to decipher what he meant when he said Gomel Parech Ba'aver, and we ignore that he's thinking that this big bird he's referring to is a Gomel, but we ignore that because we look at the words that came out of his mouth, and the words that he articulated was Gomel. But that's not true, because Vatanya we learned, so you want to say that you only look at his words, and what his words are count, not what we know those words mean. That's not true, because we look at what he's thinking. How do you know? When they're mashbia, a person who's mechuyev hashvua in Bezdin. Rashi says, "Gabi shvuos hadayonim tanyalei hamashbia is a mechuyev shvua bebezdin." So someone who was moite b'miktas, someone was a mond with an erechad. So there's a chiyuv shvua deraisa. So by this chiyuv shvua deraisa, oimrim loy, they tell the person who has to swear, hava yedea, you should know, shaloy al daitoch onu mashbiya noisach. We are not being mashbiya you based on what you're thinking. So we don't care how you decipher the meaning of the words that we're forcing you to swear upon. El al daitenu, the meaning of the words that you're going to say will be how we decipher and interpret the meaning of those words. The al das bezdin, and the das of the bezdin, that's how you're swearing. Why wouldn't he tell this? Obviously, you're worried that he could decipher the words that he's saying completely differently. My timer, lav mishum the amrinon dilma iskundri yoivlei v'yasik luzuzi. Maybe he gave him some pieces of wood. In other words, maybe he's swearing that he returned whatever it was that he borrowed, and maybe he gave him small pieces of wood back. And he says, "I swear I gave him back 100 zuz," and he refers to a piece of wood as a zuz. He can call it a zuz, since he in his mind could refer to it as anything, so that he could make the shvur without having a violation. So they tell him it's not what you interpret zuz to be; it's what bezdin, it's what we interpret zuz to be. That's the shvur you're making. You pay back 100 zuz. He might be swearing on his own das. That's where they have to tell him, no, you're swearing on our das. So you have a raya from here, in fact, that you do go basar's das, and therefore, how could you say if he swore that he saw a gomel parech ba'aver that that's a shvuah shav? In fact, it might be a very reasonable situation, something that he saw that in his mind he deciphered that as a gomel parech ba'aver. So to Gemara, loy, that's not what it is. I love this Kanya de Rav. The reason why we say that he has to swear al das bezdin has nothing to do with the fact that he's going to interpret a word that means one thing, like zuz, and say it means something completely different, like a piece of wood. Rather, it's because of Kanya de Rav. Let's see Rashi and say it's such a gewaltige shtickle, this Kanya de Rav. Zokt Rav as follows. What's Kanya de Rav? Zokt Rashi, you always go dafke basar, what he said. And therefore, in our case, it's not shver, because no matter what he thinks, a gomel haperech ba'aver, no matter how he identifies as his gomel perech ba'aver, it's a gomel perech ba'aver, it's a shvuah shav. I have a hard idruch lon lemeimar, loyal daita. So why by a shvuas bezdin do they have to say, we don't care what you're thinking? Because he could make a shvuah beramois where it means us, but it will still defeat the purpose of the shvuah. Kigoyin, the yoyev leikana, he gave him a rod, and the rod was hollow, but it appeared to be a solid rod. So the person who owes Ruvain $100 took a rod, he hollowed it out, and he put $100 into the rod, and he gave it to Ruvain, right, as a pikadon. Then he'll swear, I paid him back the $100, and then afterwards, oh, by the way, could I come pick up the rod that I lent to you or that I left to you? If you ask like which would be 100% true. It's just that Reuben doesn't know that he has the money because Reuben just thinks he has a rod. So a case like that happened. That's what's called Kanya de Rava. Not because Rava was a crook and he did that. It's because Rava was the person who detected that was it. So that's why they tell him that you have to swear al das bezdin because you might have a trick up your sleeve. Now, this is what must have been somewhat well-known this ploy because the Mishnah, if I'm not mistaken, in Kalim goes through a series of items and discusses whether or not they have a status of Kalim legabe becoming Tomei. Because a Kali is Tomei, while Pshute Kliyach are not Tomei. So the Mishnah lists off a whole bunch of things. One of these things is Kani de Rava, and the employee would wait online to get his pay. He would put the pay into that stick, and then he'd come around again. And he'd say, search for me. I don't have any money. I didn't leave here. I wasn't paid yet. And then he would get paid again. So the Mishnah there says, I think it was Rabbi Yochanan said, Vaili, that I'm even mentioning these types of kalim because I might be putting ideas into somebody's head. Someone may never have thought of doing such a gnevish shtickle, and I'm putting that into I'm giving them ideas. But Vaili, if I don't say it, I do have to tell you that if someone has a crook who has such a stick, that stick will become Tomei. You know, people could be biggest crooks, but the tumah they won't be makbid on, right? The people are much more makbid on bin adam lamaka than they are on bin adam mechaver. So this is a similar type of device that an erlich person doesn't even know what these things are. Its purpose is only for stealing. Tashma. What's that? Smuggling. Right. Oh, but that's the Dover mitzvah. That's the Dover mitzvah. I have a kind of Dover. It's called my car. It's called under my seats. Tashma. V'chein matzinu, you find a similar case where we have to make sure that this person swearing, in this case it's Klal Yisrael swearing, I guess we can call this the Leblius strikes again, because we're talking about the Shavuah to be Makabal the Torah. V'chein matzinu k'sheshbia Moshe es Yisrael. Amalani he told them, Du'u, you should know. Shaloi al daitchem ani mashpia eschem. I don't care how you're going to interpret those words that you're saying. Ella al das hamokim val daiti. Frank to Gemara, why did he have to do that? So before we ask Gemara why he had to do that, I don't understand. What was Moshe Rabbeinu worried about? He was worried about that when they swear to be Mekayim the mitzvah, they're referring to something else, right? And they're not being Mekayim themselves. Frank Toshis, I love this kasha. Frank Toshis, Kishashbi Moshe Shua Ksas Kosha. Ma Haisamay Elas Shvua. What exactly did Moshe Rabbeinu fear? How would the Shvua help? He made them swear they won't avoid the Zohar. Well, the same way you're worried that he'll be over avoid the Zohar, if he, what do you swear not to do avoid the Zohar? If you can do avoid the Zohar, for sure it should be choshed that you're going to violate the Shvua. Okay. Zok the Heilige Gemara weiter. What was the problem? Why did Moshe need to do that? All he should have told them to say was, Kaimu, be Mekayim, the mitzvahs. Zokt Gemara, Kaimu ma the Amar Aloika. Zokt Gemara, Elamai, why couldn't he make them say that? Lav Mishum, the Maski Adatayu, Avoidus Koichavim. When they swear that we're going to serve Eloika, they might be referring to their Getchka. So that's why he couldn't force them to say that. Elamai, you see from here that we are concerned to take into consideration what they're thinking. Zoktim Loi, Mishum Davoidus Kachavim Nami Yikri Eloika. L'chsev Eloi Hey Kesef Hey Zov. So this is not someone identifying a camel, a bird as a camel. Even the Torah calls Avodah Zarah Lekei. So it's a legitimate translation to that word, so that's why that wouldn't work. Fact Gemara, why don't they say something that would be more specific, that he couldn't possibly think it's something else, such as Kaimu Torah? Zakt Gemara, Chada Torah. There's two Torahs. There's Torah Shabbat and there's Torah Shabbat Peh. So if they would just swear to be Mekayim the Torah, they wouldn't have fully accepted both Torah Shabbat and Torah Shabbat Peh. In fact, Gemara Velema Kaimu. This is funny because Baruch was literally entering into a lifelong deal with a nation who he does not trust, because we're weaseling. The Shavuos made it in such a way where we can't weasel our way out of it. Velema Kaimu Shtei Soiros. Maybe they should say two Torahs, and that means obviously the only possibility that could be referring to is Torah Shabbat and Torah Shabbat Peh. So no, you know what two Torahs could refer to? It could be referring to Torah Chat and Torah Osham. Yeah, we'll bring the Korban Chavos when necessary, or Osham when necessary. So why couldn't they make him swear Kaimu Kala Torah Kula? Zok Gemara, because that they could have in mind that it's only the Avera, they're only accepting for themselves not to do Avodah Zarah, Avodah Chacham. The Amar Chamura Avodah Chacham Shekala Koifer Ba Kamoida B'Chala Torah Kula. So maybe when they swore that we'll keep Kala Torah Kula, they might only be referring to the Isra of Avodah Zarah. V'lei Malahu Kaimu Mitzvah, be Mekayim Mitzvah, the Mitzvah. Something more, I would just say Chada Mitzvah. They would say that shvur means I'm only going to become one mitzvah. How about Kaimu Mitzvahs? Something more, Tarti. Wants to make us swear Kala Mitzvahs Kulan. Something more, it's swear Kala Mitzvahs Kulan. That could be referring to mitzvah tzitzis. The Amar Shkula mitzvah tzitzis keneged Kala Mitzvahs Kulan. Frank Gemara v'lemelahu Kaimu sheish me'os v'shloish esrei mitzvahs. Keep 613 mitzvahs. Frank Gemara ulataymeich. According to you, that you have all these different options of what you could have made him say, ask him a simple kasha. V'lemelahu al daiti al dasamokam lamali. What did Moshe Rabbeinu say? You're swearing al daiti and al dasamokam. That's also redundancy, right? It's enough to say you're swearing al daiti. Before we turn over, there's a very interesting Rashi. Toisvis, tzitzis, Zok Rashi, is shkula keneged kol Torah kula. Zokt Rashi beautifully. How many mitzvahs are there in the Torah? We just discussed here. 613. What is the gematria of the word tzitzis? So tzaddik is 90, and 1 is 100. So tzaddik yod is 100. Tzaddik is 90. So far you're at 290, right? And 290 plus 4. No, I didn't make sense. Oh, it's 90, 400. Oh, there's no yud. So 90, 400 is how much? It's 491? Okay. It's 591. Okay, good. So let's look at Rashi. So 600. Okay, that's good. I'm very tired. I can't even think straight. So let's just go through. Tzaddik and Yud is 100. Tzaddik is 100. That's 100 and 100 and 400 is 600. Right. So the Gematria is 600. That's right. Okay. Thank you. Now you have Shemoyne Chuten. There's 8 Chuten in each tzitzis. So that's now 608. The Chamish Ksharim, and then there's 5 knots. So 608 plus 5 is 613. So therefore, tzitzis is skula keneged kol Torah. That's what Rashi says. Thank you. So we're back to our kasha. If you're so worried, so say al daiti. What's up is al dasam wakrim? How many dasas does that be according to? Zok to Helig Gemara. Ella kihechi deloi tehava hafara l'shvuasai. Zok Rashi Allah hachi ka'amalu. This is what Moshe Rabbeinu meant to tell them. That loyal daitchem, not because we're afraid you have some crazy meaning in mind, because that's not relevant. Because we hold that you translate it as the pashtus meaning of the word, not some weird translation that he might have. So why is it? It's kihecha de tahavishu aschem al das hacherim v'lo yuchlu heim latira. Whenever you swear al das harabim, then you can't stop being matter nether. If you just make your own shvua, your own nether, you can go to a rav, you could be sure, you could be matter nether. But a nether al das rabim, that you cannot be made for. The nether shoulder al das rabim ain't lo yafara. So therefore, Sai al Das, Moshe Sai al Das Amakim, now it's already considered a Neder al Das, multiple entities, and therefore it cannot be moved for. So they would never be able to go to their Rav and ask the Rav to be Matir Neder so that they shouldn't have to keep the Torah anymore. That wouldn't work because there is no Hafal. Gewaltig. Sagt der Heilige Gemara weiter. Im loyra isi nachash kakaris beisabat. Frank Gemara, you're saying that's an impossibility. I'm telling you that it's a very real possibility to have such a big fat snake. V'loy v'ahu da'ava b'shnei shvar malka. There was once this big fat snake. What's that long? It's called an articulated python. Right? Those are the biggest snakes. They could be like 30, 40 feet long, and they can eat like a horse. And they could be like 18 inches in diameter. Some massive snakes that you could have. What? Oh, anaconda, right? That's what it's called. Called an anaconda. That's right. So and I think an anaconda is an articulated python. I think the same thing. But I'm not a big mumch in snakes. But what I know about snakes in particular is that people used to have them as pets, and they threw them out in the Florida Everglades. And now there's a massive problem that the Everglades is overpopulated with these big snakes, and they're destroying the entire ecosystem in the Florida Everglades. So the government of Florida has a reward. They pay you per foot for every one of these anacondas or articulated that you kill. They pay you. So there are people, that's what they do for a living. All day long, they go into the Everglades and they hunt snakes. How does a Meshul gonna know this? Because I saw it on YouTube. So there's guys who have YouTube channels about how they capture and kill these anacondas. And they make money from it. So if I'm not, they're not poisonous. They're not poisonous, but they pack a bite. They can bite. They can bite and literally almost slice your hand off. They are very dangerous. So these people who do it aren't like some yeshivish edel guys who are doing it. Some big Rabbakoyim are doing it. Like, oh, my coil check is late. I'm in the Miami coil. Loma again happen on the condoms. I don't think it works that way. He gives those you doing, but remember Chaim Webner had a drone company. One of the reasons for the drones was to help them in the Everglades and these types of things. It was so big. There was a snake. The achzik tleser or vusa tivna. Now Rashi has two ways to explain what it is, but it was such a big fat snake. What they had to do is they needed to take down the snake. Oh, welcome. They needed to take down the snake. So how did they take down the snake? What they did is they made it into a Trojan horse. What does that mean? So Rashi is an interesting story. They took Molei Shlosh Esei Arvei Susim. Arvei Susim is the stalls of horses. And if I'm not mistaken, they were huge and they held like 1,000 horses. So it was a massive warehouse type of place. And they took 13 worth of teven, shahaya. So can you imagine to get a snake to eat that much teven in one shot? Why did they do this? They had this problem with the snake that was swallowing people. They also chavilos teven. They made huge bundles of teven. They put inside they concealed inside these chavilos behemoths and chayis that would tear apart the snake from the inside out. So it's like the opposite of a Trojan horse. To tear apart the snake from the inside out, that's how they were going to take over, get the snake dead. Or or they had inside these animals, they also put gachleyesh. So that, or maybe the gachleyesh were directly in the tevin. I don't know how that would have worked, but whatever it is, they found some way to get the snake to swallow these huge things, and then the snake would be destroyed from the inside out. That's how they decided to take down the snake. Ubolam, the snakes naturally swallowed these decoys. Ubara begufa umeis, and they burnt them up inside. So that's probably what happened. In order, you can't put a coal into straw. So they put the coal into an animal, the animal into the straw. The snake eats the whole thing in one fell swoop, and then the snake will burn from the inside out. So it doesn't mean storehouses full; it means bundles full. But either way, that was obviously a very big snake. I think you could legit say that it's Kakaris Beisavat. Zok Gemara, Amar Shmuel, you're right. When we say Kakaris Beisavat, it's not referring to the size of the snake. The size of the snake could be Kakaris Beisavat, but the Kakaris Beisavat have like marks on the wood. The wood has a grain. There's marks on it. we're referring to the skin color of the snake looked like it had scratches on it. It was talking about the markings on the snake, and that you never found. Frank, what do you mean you never find that? Kulunami mitra of trifin. Yes, you find in their neck area that they have this type of skin design, the skin pattern, but you don't ever find it on their back. And he's saying, I saw a snake that had this type of formation on its back, and that's something that's impossible. Zogt Gemara weiter. Shavuos oichel. It's funny because unless it's a milsa that you do a coil, it's not a shavuos. It must be everybody in those days were familiar with the formations on a snake's back. Me, you could show me, you could put an Archie comic on it and tell me that's what it looks like, and I'll believe you. I don't know what a snake back looks like, but I guess in those days they knew their snakes better. What if someone makes a shvur that he will eat his kikar or shvur shlo? So now what happens is the second shvur is a shvur shav. If he swore, this is referring to the last case of the Mishnah, where he swore he's going to eat it, and then he swore that I'm not going to eat it, and then he didn't eat it. So if he didn't eat it, he's chayiv because of a shavuos bitoy, because he swore that he would eat it, and then he didn't eat it. But mishum shavuos shav loy mechayiv, are you not going to be mechayivim for shavuos shav? The fact is, if someone swears that he's going to eat something, and then he swears that he's not going to eat that second shavuos is never chal, and it's automatically shavuos shav. So why in the sefer does the Mishnah say he's chayiv mishum shavuos bitoy and not a shavuos shav? I have a yotzol shavuos shav. Tani af al shavuos bitoy. In the first case, where he ended up eating it, where he's going against the shavuos shav, but he's supporting the shavuos bitoy. So in the first case, he's only being over shavuos shav. In the second case, he's also being over from shavuos bitoy. Zok tehelig mishnah weiter. Shavuos bitoy naheges ba'anoshim uvanoshim. Men and women are covered by the chiyuv to bring a carbon if they make a shavuos bitoy. B'kroivim or b'chadrim, it doesn't matter if the person's related or not. And Rashi speaks out, this nusach is not really relevant to shavuos bitoy. What does it have to do with a carbon on? But since it's relevant by other shavuos, like by shavuos ha'edus, a Karev wouldn't be able to make shavuos ha'edus because there's a apostle aid, so it throws in the same nusach. B'ksherin ubapsul, whether they're kosher to say edus or they're apostle. B'fnei bezin v'shaloi b'fnei bezin, it doesn't matter if the shavuos is made in front of the bezin or not. Again, we know that shavuos ha'edus is only in front of the bezin. It's only by a kosher aid. Mipi atzmai. If you make the shvua on your own, nobody is mashbiya you. Right? But now, we know that already. Shavuos shav is also nagish by noshim uvanoshim, rechakim uvakroivim, b'ksherim uvapsulim, b'fnei bezin v'shaloi b'fnei bezin, u'mipiatzma. And there, it's v'chayva is doinim makos, v'al a potter, because there is no carbon out of the earth for a shavuos shav. Achazu v'achazu. Whether it's a shavuos shav or whether it's a shavuos bitoy, hamushpa b'diacherem chayiv. If someone was mashpia him to make that shvuah, it would also be chayiv. For instance, he said lo yachalti ayoyim or v'lo hinachti tefillin ayoyim, and the person who said it to said, really mashpiachani, swear to me in fact that you taka didn't eat today. Swear to me in fact that you didn't wear tefillin today. The Omer Amen, and he said Amen, so someone was mashpia him and he accepted it by saying Amen, chayiv, he would also be chayiv for a shavuos bitoy. Zok tehelig Gemara. Amar Shmuel. Kol ha'inu amen achar shvuah. If someone answers amen when someone is mashbiah him, it's kamoichi shvuah mipiv dami. It's exactly as if he actually made the shvuah himself. Dichsiv. Where do you find that we're mashbiah somebody and they answer amen and they're liable for the full shvuah? We find it by Soita. It says v'amar ha'isha amen amen. I guess we can call this the Leblim strikes again because it's in Parshas Nosai, which is also coming very, very closely, right? Because this parsha is parsha Bamidbar, but right after Shavuos is parsha Nosei. Zokt Rashi, Kamochi Shvu Mipiv, L'chol Dover. Bein L'schayev Mishum Bitoy, even to be Mechayevim after Shavuos Bitoy, to be Inon Sheyoyti B'Svos. You just need that he should articulate the Shvuah. Bein L'inyan Shavuos Edus, the Mechayev Meir Mipiatzmai Af Shaloi Beves. So you're Chayev Mipiatzmai, but you're also Chayev if you say Amen. Amar Papa Mishmei Derava. Masnisnu Brisa Nami Deka. This halacha that Shmuel said, that saying Amen is as if you made the actual shvuah. We actually see that if we're medayik in our Mishnah, and we also see it if you're medayik in a Brisa that we're going to quote. So the Gemara starts with the Brisa. The Gedani, Shavuos Eidus, Noheges Banoshim, V'loi Benoshim, because a woman is pasalatus. Berchaikin, V'loi Bekroivim. only for someone who's a rachik, someone who's not possible laedus as a karev. B'ksherin v'lei b'psulim. Ve'ein hahegas ela b'ru'uyin lahayid. It only is nageya someone who could have been an aid. Ubefnei best. This shalai b'fnei best. Itzai applies if you make a shavuos or edus in front of bezin, or even not in front of bezin. Mipi atzmai. That's if you made the shavua yourself. But if you were sworn by somebody else, then einam chayavin ad sheyichbru behen bevezin, unless you deny that you have the edus in bezin. It's not sheyichbru. What's the lotion? Sheyichbru behen bevezin. Divrei Rav Meir. This is the shita of Rav Meir. Okay. Utanya bebrisa. We learned in the brisa. Shavuos edus ketzad. What is the Shavuos edus? Amar la'edim. Someone told Adam, a Baldin who needs the testimony of Adam, tells to Adam, Boyu v'hei iduni. Please come and say edus for me that I require. And they told him back, Shavua she'ein anu yoidin lach edus. We don't know. We don't know any edus for you. That was the Shavuos edus. Oish amru ein anu yoidin lach edus. Or he said ein anu lach edus. And then he said, Mashbiani aleichem v'amru amein. So that's Sai Shvu that they articulate on their own. Sai Mushpa Bipiacherim, Bain Bifnei Bezdin, Bain Shaloi Bifnei Bezdin, Bain Mipiatzmai, Bain Mipiacherim, Kivin Shekafru Behem Chayav and Diver Meir. Now, this is a stira when they obey, Kachin Adadi, because we learned earlier, Bifnei Bezdin, Vishloi Bifnei Bezdin, Mipiatzmai. Only Mipiatzmai is a Shavuos Ha'edus, considered a Shavuos Ha'edus, even if it's not in front of Bezdin. But if someone else was mashpia you by Shavuos Eidus, then Einan Chayavin Ad Sheyichbru Ben Bebest. Right? That's what it says in the first brisa quoting Reb Meir. Yet in the second brisa quoting Reb Meir, it says it doesn't make a difference. It says Bein B'fnei Bezdin, Bein Shaloi B'fnei Bezdin, Bein Mipiatzmai, Bein Mipiacherim. So you have a stira here, because in the first brisa it says Mipiacherim, it only works on Bezdin, and in the second brisa Mipiacherim even works out of Bezdin. So what is it? Zok Gemara Kashin Adodi. If he answered Amen to the Shavua, then it's Mechayev him even close to Bezin, because the Shmuel said it's as if you articulated those words yourself. And if you articulate those words yourself, that's Mushba Be'atzmi. The Brisa that says it only works from Bezin is speaking where Bezin was Mashpia him and he didn't say Amen, but he just agreed. So therefore, that would only be considered Shavuos Eidus if it happened in front of Bezin. Okay, Gavaltik. You also have a raya from our Mishnah. I might be making a mistake. When we said earlier at the beginning of the Mara that Masnisin the Brisa Namideka, does that mean the Mishnah of Shavuos Edus Naheges Banoshim? Because maybe one is a Mishnah and then there's a Brisa explaining the Mishnah. So I think the Masnisin the Brisa is Minei Obey. We had a steer between the Mishnah and the Brisa, and from that we figured out. I think because that's a Rashi has me the Makshinon Masnisin the Brisa Adodi for the Mitzvahs Al Bahachi. So Ravina Mishvei Rava, when he says Masnisin Lochi Namideka, is not referring to the Masnisin that we just mentioned earlier. Even besides that, our Mishnah also seems to indicate this same halacha that if you make a Shavua, if somebody else is mashpia you and you answer Amen, it's as if you said the Shavua yourself. The Katani Shavuos Bitui, Naheges Banoshim Uvanoshim, Berchakim Uvakravim, Viksherim Uvapsulim, Bifnei Bezin, Vishalai Bifnei Bezin, Mipi Atzmai. Mipi Matzmai in, Mipi Acherim Loi. So our Mishnah at the beginning says that it's only a Shavua if you made it Mipi Atzmai. But the Katani Seifa, Zeh v'zeh, Mushpa Mipi Acherim, Chayiv. So Minei Ubei in our Mishnah, you have that same contradiction that we discussed earlier. Right? What does it say over here? When it talks about all these things to do with Piatzmai, the Chayav nos doinem akash v'shugasa poter, and then it says Ach azu v'ach hamushpa piacherim chayiv. So a moment ago it said Afka Piatzmai, right? The Mishnah Piatzmai, and then the Mishnah even piacherim is chayiv. So what is it? It must be the Zakta Gemara. The Tony Shavuos Peter Negus Badashim of Dashim Chayiv B'Chayiv B'Shev B'Sulam B'Beis B'Beis B'Piatzmai B'Piatzmai Piachem Loi. The Tony Seifa Zev Zev Mushpa Piachem Chayiv Kosh Nadati. Elav Shema Mina Ha Da Ana Amein. It's as if you said it yourself. Ha Da Loi Ana Amein. It's not as if you said it yourself. In fact, the Gemara, if the Brisa and the Mishnah tells us this halacha that Mushba If you said Amen, it's just as if you said the Shvu yourself. So then why do I need Shmuel? Well, Shmuel Makamashman. What Shmuel telling us? We learned it from this Mishnah from this rice already. So Gemara, Shmuel telling you how to learn up the Mishnah. He's the one who pointed out the inconsistency in the Mishnah that leads us to conclude that in fact, saying Amen is like Mushma Piyatzma. Zok to Gemara, the bottom Rashi, Ashminan, what Shmuel is teaching us is how to learn the Mishnah. The Davkat Dan Mipi Atzmoy B'Shavuos Bitoy, Avo Mipi Acherem is Potter. With the Katani Masnisan Seifa Achazu Achazu Mushba Pirchem Chayiv is Davka Ba'anu Amen. Tanan Kedekatani Bar Amen. That's Shmuel's Chiddush how to understand the Mishnah. To like Tema Urchan Milsa Katani. Don't say it's Urchan Milsa, but it's not really B'Davka. Okay, Baruch Hashem, we were zeicha to finish the third parak of Masech Shavuos. And B'Lineder Hadin Lach Shavuos Shtayim, B'Lineder Hadin Lach Shavuos Shtayim Basra. It's called B'Lineder Hadin Lach Shavuos Shtayim Basra. And I think we're at the final stretch. How many more blood are there for this? What? How many more program? I ran at a racetrack. My Gemara ends today. What happened was when we finished the third parak in Shavuos, the corporation of the Mesifta decided they need more money. So they said, that's kind of enough. Let's put it. That's why Archibald has so many more halakim sometimes, because they need even more money. Shkoyach.